another episode here on Sunnyside at Farms. Yes, the combining continues, although obviously we're getting into the evening now, so off camera I just finished a little bit of that wheat field that we had left, so I got that finished, and then we're straight into here and straight on with it. The problem being when you've got small equipment is that you know, you need to keep moving otherwise and taking advantage of sunshine, otherwise you know, if you kind of play it casual, you know, the weather and circumstances can start to catch you out. Not necessarily so much on Farming Simulator, but in real life. And as I say, I tried to play the game the way that, you know, we farmed in real life, and so you know, I do keep pushing on, because otherwise, as I say, we would be you know, in danger of missing the window, so to speak. Although back in the 80s, seasons were seasons. You know, now we just get weather. You know, but back then seasons were seasons, and it was a little bit more reliable. I can remember some very hot summers in the 80s. You know, where I had sort of the whole of the back of my legs burnt, and arms and face, and you know, that's the joys of being ginger. You know, it only has to be daylight, there doesn't have to be no sun, and I'm burnt to a crisp. Even on a rainy day I'm having to wear sun cream, but yes, it's the joys of, as I say, of being ginger. I'm sure no one will hold that against me. But yeah, like I say, it's going well. We'll get this, obviously we'll get these harvested, and then you know, next we'll need to bale them. It's a pity we can't use the straw for the chickens. I know they, you know, they wouldn't feed on it, but you know, it's a pity that we can't you know, as I say, use the straw for the chickens. But we can sell the bales, you know, and the thing is, with selling the bales, it's extra money. It will help, you know, it will help to move us along. I would like to buy some more land. You know, I've said throughout this save that you know, we don't own nowhere near the land you know, that I want to own. I'm not too worried about upgrading you know, tractors and equipment at this moment in time. I'm more than happy with the David Browns. I love the David Browns, to be fair. You know, that's where my tractoring career started, way back when I was probably about 8 years old. So when I was 8, my mum used to work on a bulb farm, which was local to us. It was just down the road from us, and it was basically David and Mary Chapman. They owned, or they had a small holding, and on that small holding, they at this time, because eventually they changed ethos, if you like, but when I was sort of, you know, in the 80s and up to about the mid-90s, they were predominantly bulb growers, and you know, daffodils and you know, stuff like tulips, you know, and stuff like that. And mum worked for them, along with another lady that was local, who was very good friends of my mum, Sin. She's unfortunately not with us anymore, but and years later it would turn out that I would end up going out with her daughter for a bit, and me and her daughter, the only reason we broke up was because Sin and my nan were besties. They lived next door to each other, and my nan kind of, Sin was alright with it, right? So Tracy's mum was okay with it, like she thought it was brilliant. And then she said, but I don't know what your nan's going to say about it. And I said, well, I don't really care what nan says about it, to be fair. I know how I feel, so, you know, I'm not too bothered. But the thing with my nan was, it was never quite as straightforward as all of that. You know, my nan, bless her, she had a heart of gold, but she also had, she was very Jekyll and Hyde. So one day she could be the loveliest person that you could ever wish to meet, and then the next day she would be, you know, the foulest of mouth, horrible bully of a person. And you never knew which one you were going to get every time you went round there. You know, it was either, you know, it was one or the other. Some days you would get kind of what I used to call man in the middle, where she would have a whinge and a moan and she would have to be nasty to someone, but overall she was, you know, really pleasant. But, you know, I loved my nan dearly because, as I say, when she was nice, she had a heart of gold. And, you know, I mean, my granddad died when my nan was in her 50s, you know, and so, you know, it wasn't easy for her, and she was on her own, and she wasn't, like, I can, so I'm at the moment on the verge of getting a council bungalow, or at least that's what it's starting to look like, and I'm quite looking forward to living on my own little bit of space, just me. You know, as I've said many times before, sort of broke up with, you know, my ex in February, and sort of kind of vowed almost immediately, you know, I'm not going to find someone else. Not that I'm not, but I'm not going to look for anyone else. You know, I want to be on my own, and you know, so I'm looking forward to it. It doesn't frighten me. It doesn't. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm quite happy in my own company. Jesus, when you're a tractor driver working for 18 hours a day, you've got to be able to be happy in your own company, because you ain't seeing no one else. Occasionally, you know, if you were harvesting or whatever, you would see other people through the window of your tractor into their tractor, but, you know, it was about as much as it got. Or I guess at lunch times and stuff like that, you know, you would probably, if there was time, I mean, you know, the second farm that I worked on, you know, very rarely did we ever stop for lunch. You know, we always ate lunch on the move. The first farm that I worked on, yeah, we would stop for lunch. You know, there's only there's about 1,000 to 1,200 acres, and, you know, we had two decent sized tractors. We had a Verdestat seed drill 6 meter. We had, do you know what I mean? Like, you know, the equipment in a way was too big for the farm that it was on. So it meant that you know, there was more than enough time for us to stop for lunch, you know, and we would have a chat, but myself and John. But yeah, so as I say, back in the day, my mum worked with Sin. As I say, later on, I would end up going out with Sin's daughter. And and so I went round to my nan's, because I used to go around there quite a lot. So I used to go around there. So I used to go every day, but every day to drop the paper off. But Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, I would go to my nan's for a couple of 3 hours. And this was before I worked on a farm. Then once I worked on a farm, it would be sort of over the weekends. The first farm that I worked on, I used to get Fridays off. Because of the amount of hours that I worked in the week, I used to get Fridays off. If there wasn't much going on, you know, if we were busy, then I would be at work naturally. But in the winter time, you know, I'd have Fridays off, and because of, you know, the amount of overtime that I would have done in the week, you know, I got sort of my Friday pay and I got my extra. And then after I'd been there about 2 years, they then paid me for the Friday anyway. So I didn't lose any money then, because the boss man said, you know, you always come in and help us when we're short. And you know, so therefore we'll give you a hand. And yeah, but so I went round one Sunday, and I'm sitting there, and my nan was not, you know, she was in the middle nan, you know, and she was, and anyway, you know, we sort of sit there, and she, you know, towards the end of her life, she would talk most weekends about the war and stuff. And I'm a massive, not lover of the war because obviously what it represents, but I'm very interested in the history of not only my family in the war, but also as well the country and the war itself. Because yes, it's a horrible, terrible thing, and there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from that. But for myself, I'm talking to people that lived through it. Hopefully, it's not looking likely, but hopefully, I will never have to live through such a thing. You know, that's my hope. Whether that ends up being my reality, I'm not so sure. But you know, that's my hope. And yeah, we was around there one Sunday, and she was a bit quiet, and I said to her, I said, "You're very quiet today, Nan." And she looked at me and she went, "Are you being dishonest to me?" And my eyes widened and I was like, why? And she sort of looked at me, she goes, "I've heard a rumour about you." So I said, "Oh, what rumour have you heard about me?" I said, "Bear in mind that I don't go out very much, Nan." So I said, "You know, it's probably pinch of salt time." And she said, "Are you going out with Tracy?" And my head went, "How the hell do you know that?" And that wasn't quite the word that he used. It began with F, ended in K. And I was like, I went, "No." And she went, "Oh, well," she said, "a lot of people are saying you are." I said, "Well, who's a lot of people? Never mind about who's a lot of people. Don't you lie to me." I'm not, I promise. You know, so anyway, I sort of denied it and maintained the denial, and then soon afterwards, you know, she was then sort of going to sit and she was going around. Anyway, this is nothing to do with the story that I was going to tell you, so I'll get back on track. So I was saying I love the David Browns, and that's where I started my tractor driving career. So yeah, back in the, you know, sort of late 80s, so mid to late 80s. So it'd been about 80, well, late 80s, it would have been about 88, 89. In the summer holidays, obviously Mum worked on the bulb farm, and as I say, David and Mary, they predominantly grew bulbs. There was a tiny bit of wheat and different things on the land that they had. They had a really old class combine, the same one as this one, but without the cab. And so yeah, they had the one without the cab. And in the as I say, in the summer holidays, Mum would work there. She would work there pretty much. So she'd work there from probably I would say about May to probably October, September, October time. And anyway, we, like, in the summer months, she was there, and I used to go to work with my mum in the daytime, and we would, you know, and I loved it. You know, we used to pack up a few tractors and what have you, and they were out in the fields picking bulbs, you know, and I would be sat, you know, on the field, usually behind the cover of boxes, which, you know, nowadays, you know, people talk about health and safety and about how it's gone mad. You know, these boxes were stacked, you know, probably 4 or 5 high. They were like 1-ton boxes, and I was playing underneath them, and I was bashing into them, and do you know what I mean? Like, you know, and you know, not an eyelid was battered anywhere. You know, there was no high vis coats inside, and no one got killed. No one ever got hurt. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, because we had a wonderful thing that seems to have gone out of existence these days. We had a thing called, what was it now? Oh yeah, common sense. That's what we had. But yeah, so I was playing with my toys, and just one day, so every so often, so David would drive like all of the tractors, so he'd lay out the boxes, he'd then go on the little tractor with the forklift, the David Brown with the forklift, pick the boxes up, and then put them onto low loaders. You know, he would also drive, because it was predominantly David Brown's, and they also had a really old Massey Harris. No, I don't think it was a Massey Harris. I think it was actually one of the early Massey Fergusons. And the reason why I say that is because it was red, and I don't think Massey Harris did a red one. I think theirs was always grey, wasn't it? I might be wrong on that. My knowledge of older tractors, not so grand. You know, my knowledge of sort of newer modern day tractors, a lot better. Still not brilliant, because I'm not really interested in the technical jargon. I'm just interested in driving them. But yeah, but I'm sure it was red. Do you know what? I want to say it was I think it was a Massey 135, but it didn't have a cab. You know, all of his tractors were cabless, apart from the 885 David Brown and the David Brown with the forklift. I can't remember what that was. No, I can't remember. I'd have to go and see him. To be fair, he doesn't live very far from me, so I could go around and see him. But yeah, so I was there one day. I was playing, and he came to the boxes because he needed to lay some more boxes out. It was in quite a big field, so it wasn't very wide, but it was really long. And so he needed to put the empty boxes on a trailer because he needed to get all the way, and he couldn't carry the amount that he needed to lay out down and then back again. Anyway, he sort of asked me to move out of my way and move my toys, which, you know, no problem. Yeah, he loaded the tractor up, and then he come to me and he says, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I said, "I want to be a tractor driver like my granddad and my uncle." And he said, "Well," he said, "you got to practice." And I said, "Yeah, I know." So he said, "How old are you?" So I said, "I'm 8." So he said, "Oh, good." He said, "You're old enough to start practicing then." He said, "Jump in there." And I just thought I was going for a ride with him. I literally just thought I was probably going to go for a ride with him. You know, he was probably going to let me steer. And you know, that was going to be the sum of my kind of sort of practicing. But I got in, and he said, "Right," he said, "you don't touch the pedals." So I was like, "Right." He said, "I'll put it in gear." I said, he said, "Put your foot on that pedal there, all the way down. That's it. Hold it there," because he said it's in gear, until I'm on the trailer. He said, "And then when I shout," he said, "or wave," he said, "then just take that foot off really slowly." He said, "Just really slowly." He said, "Otherwise you'll throw me off the trailer." And anyway, he got on the trailer, and because he shouted and waved, and I I lifted my foot up, what I thought was slowly, but the David Brown 885, the clutch pedal had a little bit of a kick in it because the spring was quite sort of active, as I call it, and because it pushed me being sort of 8 years of age, I didn't have, you know, very strong legs and feet, and because it pushed my up, and because he kind of sort of went stumbling back of the trailer, and then I just about heard him shout, "I said steady." And then because of the tractor didn't have a back on it, so a bit like these tractors here, this is how they were. They were just open at the back. And he said, "Right, just drive down where we've already been." He said, "So just drive down where you're driving now." He said, and then you know, he said, "And try and keep it as straight as you can." And yeah, that was my sort of first ever experience of driving a tractor. And when we got to the other end, he said, "We need to go back. Hang on, I'll get off." And before he could say the words "hang on, I'll get off," you know, I was already turning, as I'd swung out wide and come back in naturally, and the trailer never touched the tractor, which is always a good thing. And he was very impressed, and so was I, to be fair. So was I. But yeah, so oh, hang on, no, I don't want to be down here. Don't want to be down here. We're never going to make the end of the field if we go down there. Need to go down this one. Should have emptied the tank on the last breed coming the other way. No problem. We'll get the tank emptied as much as we can now. Should be able to make it back then. But yeah, so that was my very first ever tractor driving experience, and then once sort of late summer arrived, so which I mean August was, you know, it was midsummer basically, and you know, then they would be back at the farm then once all the bulbs were harvested, back at the farm then, and they would like Mum and Sid and that would be, and Mary and David. Sometimes their two sons would help, but one son was a lorry driver and the other one was away at agricultural university, and or college maybe, and so they, you know, they kind of helped as and when they could, but it was predominantly David, Mum, Sid and Mary. And yeah, so that was my first sort of real tractor driving experience. And then what would happen is in the when they were in the sheds, or it was like a lean-to, and the grading machine was set up in there, and it was really dusty in there, so they wouldn't let me in there. But I would sit and play on the combine, or I'd sit and play on the other tractors, or you know, sort of on the back of their sort of house and mini farmyard, because I say it was a small holding. They had a field, and that, I remember this particular year that field was harvested, and David got his son's pedal tractors and stuff out, and I was quite happy pedaling my way around a wheat field or wheat stubble field, and then if David ever went out and did anything on sort of like the farm, like baling, or if there was some ploughing to be done or whatever, I'd go and spend the day with him, you know, and I'd get to have a little go at ploughing, and I'd get to have a little go at, you know, all the different little jobs, and yeah, that's how I kind of started my farming career. And then in the sort of mid-90s, around about the mid-90s, the flour industry in England had pretty much gone. If you weren't growing it on a very large scale, you weren't really making money. It's like when I was growing up, just about every house in the village had a garden, and in that garden you grew strawberries. You took it to the strawberry merchant who lived in the actual village, because most of the people that grew strawberries were on the sort of outskirts of the village, but you would take it to the strawberry merchant in the village. He would then overnight, obviously, load the lorry through the day. Overnight he would drive it to Covent Garden, and you would sell your strawberries at Covent Garden the next day, and then he'd drive back after the market, and then you know, sort of ready to pick up the next day's strawberries, and then, you know, sort of back to London. And of course, you know, people started to grow them on a sort of commercial basis and a, you know, much larger scale, and that ended, you know, the garden, sort of what my granddad used to call the garden farmer. You know, and this was practices that they'd done, you know, for the war effort, and it carried on, but by the mid-90s it was rapidly dying out. And it was the same with the flour trade. You know, there was a few farms in the area that, or small holdings in the area that, you know, that were growing bulbs and flowers and different things. And what happened was that, you know, one of the growers in the village, Ellis's, I'll say their name because I don't like them, I worked for them for a little while, and they were the horriblest people I have A, ever encountered, and B, ever worked for. And I've worked in factories, and they were far more pleasant and polite, and and preferable to work in than what Ellis's farm was. I went there as a tractor driver. Well, I never got anywhere near a tractor. Essentially, I was slave labour because they were paying me next to nothing. Because I was sort of just finishing school, and sort of went there for a job, for a weekend job. Got it, and they were like, "Oh, we need young tractor drivers. We need people like you." Blah 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 blah. All this rubbish. And of course, and as I say, I never got anywhere near a tractor, and for like, I don't know, about £2 an hour. I can't remember if it was £1.50 or £2 an hour, something like that. I was, sort of either planting bulbs or deheading, or lifting heavy sacks, which, yeah, I could do at the time, but obviously with my heart condition, I was still a school kid, so I hadn't sort of built up much muscle, and while that did help, but I mean, I witnessed day after day after day, because it was all women apart from about 3 of us that were blokes, and then sort of the 2 bosses, which was Fred and I can't remember the lad's name now. I can't remember his name, but it was his dad and his son. It was the dad and son that ran it, and as I say, day after day after day, I witnessed them making women cry, throwing balls at the women or myself, or sort of anyone. And funnily enough, the 2 other blokes that worked there was myself, another lad, and then 2 fully grown blokes. But they never shouted at them, and they never threw balls at them, and they never did, sort of hardly anything to them. And I always wondered why as a kid. Well, it makes perfect sense now as an adult. It's kind of like, well, of course they didn't, because if they tried to bully 2 fully grown blokes, they get a smack in the mouth, There's no, 2 ways about that, And to be fair, I mean, the blokes would sometimes say, "Whoa, hang on a minute, you can't treat people like this." And they used to say, "Shut your mouth, get on with your job, we pay your wages, and you can soon be out of a job." And of course they had families, and they needed to support the families, and that's what they were like. But the one thing they did do was that they recognised, I think, that being a small holding, sort of farm, growing a few bulbs was never gonna last in the world that was starting to take shape, and so therefore what they did was, because they also had an arable farm, and they sold the arable farm off, and they invested everything they had in the bulbs and the flowers, and now they grow, I would imagine, thousands of tons of bulbs. I don't know how big they are now, but they're very big, and they had an obviously a council house again with a small holding, and now it's not a small holding. Now all of the land that was out the back of their house that was fields is now huge, great big stores for flowers, for bulbs. There's like their own processing units, their own polytunnels, so that they can grow the flowers all year round. They're not restricted to just the growing seasons. They can now grow them all year round. They featured on Country File God knows how many times, and yeah, they're a massive concern now. But as I say, back then, David sort of wasn't, and to be fair to David, he recognised, I think, what they were doing, and sort of kind of, oh, I didn't realise I was nearly full. It's because I'm chatting. He recognised what was happening, and he sort of quite quickly realised that he had already been left behind, by these people, by Ellis's and by Taylor's in Holbeach, apparently a very nice firm to work for. Is it Goldridge or someone like that? Also in Holbeach, Goldwoods, something like that. Again, a very nice firm to work for. I worked for them as well. Funny story about them. Just quickly, because this episode's running on a little bit. So as I say, I was about to leave school. I was about a year from leaving school, and I used to go and help David out. And I got a job at Ellis's, and sort of one or two other things that, sort of places that I used to go. Well, I ended up leaving school, and I said to David, like, could you give me, because I wanted to work for David, but he was a small concern, and he said, like, I don't have to work for you. And what he'd done with his business, just very quickly, was in the 90s when, he realised that, he'd been sort of left behind. He turned his business into an agricultural contracting business, and he grew, rapidly. Suddenly, new tractors were starting to show up, and now, his two boys don't want nothing to do with it. He's, I would say he's in his 70s now. His wife's, she's in her 70s now, and of course they've retired and sold up, and sort of live in one of the local towns, whether it be Spalding or Holbridge or whatever. And that fair play to him, but he realised, as I say, and he grew the business. But anyway, so I went to David when I left school and said, could you, he said, I haven't got the work for you. So I said, fair enough. And he said to me, he said, but I think I can't remember what their actual name is. I know it's Gold something. I think it's Goldwoods. And I went there for a tractor driving job. They were advertising, and I applied and got an interview. And when I got there, because my dad had taken, because I couldn't drive, and it just, well, what was to transcend, it never occurred to me at the time, but afterwards I did feel quite foolish. So I goes to the interview and I talks with the farm manager, and he says to me, he says, we're looking for young lads, because what we want to do is we want to train you, but we want to keep you. We don't want to train you and then you go work for someone else. We want to keep you. So I was like, right. He said, and you've applied for a job on the farm. He said, because we've got we do flowers, we do bulls, we do potatoes, we do, but he said, you're on the actual arable farm. He said, look, which is all grain. So I was like, okay. So we're all one business, but we're all, you'll be working on sort of like the grain side of things. I was like, yeah, okay, that's fair enough, can't wait sort of thing. And then I was really enthusiastic, because I was like, wow, and because one of the part of the interview was showing me around the farm, and because I see all the tractors and that, and it's 97, the year that I was there, and they had they had two Challengers 75Es, they had a Clash Challenger 75E, I think it was a 75, or was it an 85E? I think actually the two Caterpillars were 75Es, and the Class was 85Es. I think I've got that the right way around. And they had sort of John Deere's. They had 8400, I think, John Deere's. But they had I can't really remember what they had now, because it was say it was 1997. I was like, so I'd have been 16 years of age, and as I say, my dad had taken me to the interview, and we're in the office, and he's going, right, he goes, what I'll do is I'll have a think about it. So I was like, yeah, he said, and then I'll ring you in a couple of days. So I said, okay. He said, and then I'll let you know whether you've got it or not. So I said, yeah, thank you. I said, I look forward to your phone call. And he went, that's confidence. And I said, wow. I said, at the end of the day, I said, farming needs enthusiastic people that are gonna, that want to do the job. I said, this is not a job that you can just sit and do. This is a job that you've got to want to do. I said, and the thing is, because you want to do it, what, in a way, you're letting yourself in for. And he said, what are you letting yourself in for? I said, isolation, being on your own, and long days in the summer, I said, long days without your family, without, I said, like, I said, and that's why not anyone can do this job. You've really got to, in a way, commit to the job, especially when you work on the really big farms. When you work on the small farms, it's not quite so dramatic. But when you work on the big farm, like I say, the second farm that I worked on, my girlfriend at the time, she hated it because I literally from late March to probably December, I was working, probably to 8, 9, 10 o'clock every night. And she hated it. And, yeah, I used to have my annual leave, of course, but, but she still hated it. Anyway, so I eagerly awaited the phone call, and I don't know if it was the next day or the day after the phone call duly arrived, and the manager there, or whoever, I can't remember what he was, but I'm assuming he was farm manager there, and he said, congratulations, James, pleased to tell you you've got the job. He said, when would you like to start? So I said, I'll start today if you want, because he'd rang me pretty early in the morning. He went, well, he said, not today, because he said, I haven't got no one to look after you now. He said, because I've sent them all out, to their job, work for the day. He said, start tomorrow. So I said, yeah, all right. He said, start tomorrow. He said, but because you're starting tomorrow, you won't get paid until sort of like a week, Thursday it was. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. So anyway, hangs up the phone, can't believe it, I've got a job, I'm really excited, I've got a job on a farm. It was that easy, for me to get a job on a farm, and I was like really excited. Anyway, the next day came, and that evening I was talking that afternoon I was talking to my dad, said, I've got the job, and my dad said, he goes, that's absolutely fantastic. So I was like, yeah. He goes, I can't believe it, you've done really well. He said, but there is a little niggle that you've not really taken into account yet. And I said to him, what's that? And he said, you're going to have to figure it out for yourself. Anyway, on that, my phone, the house phone goes. So I don't have a mobile at this stage. The house phone goes. Right, this is how we communicate, kids. The house phone went. No emails, no mobile phones. The house phone, it was plugged into the wall. No internet on it. No YouTube. No Instagram. None of that. And proper dial-up, old-fashioned phone. And the phone was ringing, so I answered it, and it was the farmer. He said, "Hello, James." He said, "Starting tomorrow." He said, "Do you know what time we start?" And I said, "Yeah, you said in the interview you start at 7. Ah, yeah. He said, "That's lovely." He said, "I just thought I'd make sure." He said, "Incidentally," so I said, "Yeah." He said, "I've just been looking through your thing again." He said, "And I've just realised something." So I said, "What's that?" He said, "You're only 16." So I said, "Yeah, I know." He said, "That's wonderful. As I said, we want you to come young because, we want to train you up and keep you. How are you getting to work tomorrow?" So he said, "Have you got a moped?" So I said, "No, I haven't got a moped." I said, "My mum won't let me have a motorbike." So he said, "Where are you getting to work tomorrow?" So I said, "I think either my mum's going to drop me off before she goes to work, or my brother's going to drop me off." So he goes, "Oh, that's fantastic." He said, "Tomorrow," he said, "you'll be ploughing." So I said, "Right." He said, "That requires you to drive a tractor." So he said, "I'm assuming you've got a tractor license." So I said, "No." So he said, "You haven't got a tractor license?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, you definitely haven't got a car license, and you haven't got a moped." So I said, "No." He said, "How the bloody hell do you expect to drive my tractors?" He said, "Honestly," he said, "what a complete waste of time you are." And he was really annoyed. And I think he was not necessarily annoyed at me. I think what had really annoyed him, to say it in English, was the fact that he'd only just realised. I think that's what kind of annoyed him the most, was the fact that he just realised that he'd cocked up. And it wasn't necessarily anything to do with the fact that I had kind of not put sort of 2 and 2 together to make 4, and I think that like I say, it was a bit of a problem. Needless to say, I didn't start in the morning, and I went straight back to my dad and I said, I think I know what you're talking about now. And he said, why is that? I said, I can't get to work tomorrow, can I? And he said, well, he said, you can get to work tomorrow. He said, that's no problem. He said, but how are you going to drive the stuff at work? He said, if you don't have a license. He said, you don't even have a tractor license. He said, you have to get yourself put through your tractor test. And I was like, well, how do I do that? And he said, well, I don't know, you'll have to find out. And like I said, no internet in those days, so it was a case of we had to go and find people to ask. And then a few days later, my dad got me a job in the factory where he worked, which I didn't realise he was trying to do. But he said I didn't say anything, just in case you did get your job on the farm, and just in case you could actually go off and do it. But yeah, so that was the that was the sum of that. Of that job. I got the job, fantastic. Wasn't bothered about the lack of experience because they wanted to train me up themselves, and then everyone kind of realised that I didn't actually have any licenses, so I couldn't actually do any of the jobs. But anyway, I've gone on for far too long in this episode. I've really enjoyed having a chat with you. I do like these chatty videos. I hope you like them too. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, hit that share button, share the video wherever you want. It all helps and I really appreciate it. Thanks for listening, and I can't wait to see you in my next episode. Bye for now.